What I thought was that after 5 years, Harry is still at war with his original mistake. And every time he goes on the air, he makes another one. So it's like he is now trapped in this terrible cycle.
I've asked him to step out of the way and let the experts do their job.
What do you say to those who ask, why should the taxpayer pay for your police security if you have your own private security?
Meghan Markle was nothing before she met Prince Harry, and now Prince Harry is nothing after marrying Meghan Markle. That's according to public opinion. And now royal sources are sounding the alarm, revealing she's been setting him up from the jump. And now Harry is spiraling again, this time on BBC after losing a court case literally no one thought he'd win. Many don't understand why he seriously thinks he deserves royal protection paid for by British taxpayers after abandoning his royal duties and relocating to Cali, California with Meghan. He wanted out, he got it, and now he's shocked by the consequences. But the wildest part is that Harry is now publicly suggesting the royal family is out to kill him. Well, the palace has had enough, and for the first time, they are firing back. Quietly, but clearly. And the message is brutal. Harry is being played by his own wife.
This is one of the reasons why they don't talk or why reconciliation is so hard, because no one in the palace, and let's be clear, we're talking about King Charles, his father, or his brother Prince William, is sure that whatever the discussions they have or meetings they might talk about or arguments they might have, like all families do of course, that it won't end up in Spare number 2 or in Netflix series number 6.
I don't want history to repeat itself. I think there's a lot of other people out there, the majority, they also don't want history to repeat itself.
Before we get into the palace's response, which, by the way, was far more precise than anyone expected, let's rewind a little and catch everyone up on how we even got here. Prince Harry has just come off the back of a near 4-year legal crusade, demanding taxpayer-funded police protection during visits to the UK, a case that was rejected by the High Court, predictably. First of all, publicly criticizing the institution that once protected you, and then turning around demanding that very institution continue to foot your security bill is quite delusional.
I'm devastated. Not so much as devastated as with the loss that I am about the people behind the decision feeling as though this is okay.
Right after the ruling, Harry popped up on the BBC with what honestly felt like a carefully staged emotional performance. He framed the legal defeat not as a straightforward rejection of his claim, but as something deeply personal, a betrayal. And, as standard practice, he didn't fail to use the ever-reliable Diana card. Because what's a Harry interview without dragging his mother's tragic death into the spotlight to justify his every misstep? It's as if he's forgotten, or simply doesn't care, that Diana's memory deserves more than to be used as a shield against basic accountability.
Yeah, I don't want history to repeat itself. I think there's a lot of other people out there, the majority, they also don't want history to repeat itself.
And yet again, Harry's entire delivery felt performative. Reports reveal that the interview wasn't even conducted at his Montecito home with Meghan. It was filmed at a private residence miles away at dawn, specifically timed to coincide with the court's ruling in the UK. Experts are saying that the imagery was deliberate and the setting totally controlled. Even the body language was telling as he appeared sort of nervous, foot-tapping throughout, as though even he knew he was stretching the public's goodwill to its final thread. Then, just 48 hours later, Meghan posted a suspiciously curated photo of Harry with their children, Archie and Lilibet, on social media. The comments were turned off naturally, but the message was loud enough, trying to portray Prince Harry as a family man, as if that alone should have been enough reason for everyone to feel sorry for him. And just when you thought it couldn't get more manipulative, Harry doubled down with a thinly veiled threat.
I can't see a world in which I would be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point.
Translation: if you don't give me what I want, you won't see your grandchildren. It's emotional blackmail, plain and simple, and many are starting to see it for exactly what it is, a tactic, not a truth, a pressure play meant to tug at King Charles's heartstrings, especially now as he battles cancer. But here's the thing, people aren't buying it anymore. The tone has shifted. Even previously sympathetic corners of the media are going quiet, and behind palace walls, the silence has been broken. Just so you know, while Prince Harry was spiraling on camera, nursing the sting of yet another legal defeat and unleashing yet another media monologue, the royal family couldn't have looked more unbothered. Exactly Exactly 72 hours after that BBC interview aired, where Harry, eyes heavy with frustration, King Charles and Queen Camilla appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony with Prince William, Princess Kate, and their 3 children. Not a hair out of place, not a hint of disturbance. It was Victory in Europe Day, and the firm, as always, kept calm and carried on.
Posing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace today, celebrating Victory in Europe Day.
There's no point in continuing to fight anymore.
The image was carefully picked to send a clear message. While Harry and Meghan stage emotional reckonings from rented homes and release carefully timed photo ops, the real royals stood in full regalia, waving to crowds, honoring history, and, perhaps most importantly, ignoring the noise. That balcony moment didn't just show unity, it also symbolized stability, dignity, and continuity. All the things Harry, whether he knows it or not, has lost, and he knows it. The cracks showed in his closing remarks during the interview when he finally admitted,
I would love reconciliation with my family. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious.
It was as close to accepting defeat as we're likely to get. A man who once believed he could force the hand of the monarchy, from California no less, is now beginning to understand just how much he's miscalculated. The monarchy is not begging for his return. Neither are they bending to his ultimatums either. They're not sending armed guards to Montecito or in the UK, or anywhere else in the world to ensure his safety. As this comment perfectly summarized it, it's adorable that a couple in their 40s are now both learning about consequences together. Official statement from Buckingham Palace spokesperson read, all of these issues have been examined repeatedly, with the same conclusion reached on each occasion. If we're being honest, it's embarrassing, because that ridiculous interview has managed to turn what little sympathy he had left into a complete eye-roll moment. Can you blame them? So, yeah. Unfortunately for Meghan and Harry, from the looks of it, the world is overwhelmingly beginning to pick a side, and it's not their side. As you'd expect, Meghan and Harry's critics did not waste time throwing jabs and hot takes regarding the interview. Piers Morgan couldn't help but mock Meghan's attempt at soft PR when she posted that photo of Harry with the kids right after the backlash. He hit back with the kind of sarcasm only Piers can deliver, writing, I do wish they'd stop invading their children's privacy. That was enough to get Samantha Markle, Meghan's own estranged sister, back in the mix. She called Meghan's post cheesy and pointed out that no one even knows who those kids are since you can't see their faces. And honestly, she's not wrong. Then came Megyn Kelly, who didn't hold back either. She basically said Harry should use the millions he got from Spotify to pay for his own security, like every other rich and famous person in America, and she's speaking for a lot of people. The idea that taxpayers, or anyone else, should be footing the bill for a man who voluntarily walked away from royal duty is laughable. But here's where things get really interesting. It's not just the critics anymore, it's his old supporters, the royal commentators, the journalists, the so-called friends of Harry and Meghan, who are turning on him. People like Tina Brown, Chris Shipp, Tom Bradby, names that used to rush to their defense are now silent or worse, openly criticizing them. Even Omid Scobie, usually their loudest cheerleader, has vanished from the conversation. And look, it's not because people suddenly decided to be mean, it's because what Harry said in that interview made no sense. He's out here suggesting that the royal family wanted to put him in danger, that they were somehow trying to hurt him just to force him back into the fold. It's beyond dramatic, it's just wild. Anyone with even a basic understanding of how the royal machine works knows that after Megxit, the firm was relieved to see him go. They weren't plotting his return, they were trying to move on.
Probably always struggle to forgive is that a decision that was made in 2020 that affects my every single day, and that is knowingly putting me and my family in harm's way.
The problem is that Harry keeps doubling down on this idea that the world owes him something, that the UK should pay for his security, even though he doesn't work for the royal family anymore. Regular folks, already struggling with real problems like inflation, are supposed to care about making Harry feel safe? Please. Even for those who might agree that he needs security, the way he's going about this, making wild claims, acting like a victim when he's one of the most privileged men alive, it's just too much. And when the people who used to be in your corner start looking the other way or calling you out, that says everything. Prince Harry isn't just isolated, he's sinking. And Meghan, who seems to be the only one still backing him, isn't helping the situation. If anything, her silence while he spirals in public just adds to the feeling that he's being led further and further away from reality. There's no defense for what he said. There's no spin that makes it better, and the reactions were blunt, brutal, and increasingly united, making one thing painfully clear. Prince Harry is out on a limb, and it's cracking.
Everybody knew that they were putting us at risk in 2020. And they hoped that me knowing that risk would force us to come back.
Let's start with Tina Brown, who, for the record, is not just some tabloid commentator or anti-Sussex blogger. This is a woman with deep roots in royal reporting, someone who was close to Princess Diana herself. She's been sympathetic to Harry and Meghan in the past, but this time, she didn't mince words, and it was brutal. According to Tina, Harry is basically stuck in a loop, desperately trying to justify a mistake that, deep down, even he knows was a disaster. 5 years on, and he still can't admit it. That's the tragedy here. He was warned over and over again. The palace made it crystal clear. If you walk away from your royal duties, your security goes with it. This was not new information. Neither was it a surprise. But Harry didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to deal with the consequences of his choices. He thought somehow that he could storm out and still enjoy the perks of being a prince, just without the actual work.
Well, what I thought was that after 5 years, Harry is still at war with his original mistake. And every time he goes on the air, he makes another one. So it's like he is now trapped in this terrible cycle of doubling down on the original mistake. He was told so clearly when he was considering leaving by the palace at that time, the security won't be paid for anymore. He was told it again and again.
Tina painted it perfectly. He charged out of the royal family like a man with a point to prove, yet no plan in place. And now, years later, he's left circling back, hoping the system he rejected will give him what he wants anyway. The court's rejection wasn't just legal, but also was symbolic. You don't get to have it both ways.
There was no way that this court was going to go against the findings of the security, the police. They're not going to go against that. And they're not going to go up against the police, against the royal family or the police.
But perhaps the most damning part of Tina's commentary was when she noted the absence of two simple words in Harry's entire speech. I'm sorry. Not once did Harry express any remorse for the pain he's caused his family. Not once has he acknowledged that maybe he overstepped, that maybe he's been unfair. And until he does, there's no path forward. You can't seek reconciliation while still playing the victim and accusing your own family of wanting you dead. It's not just delusional, it's offensive.
And secondly, I didn't hear two very crucial words in that entire sort of Jeremiah about, I'd like to reconcile was, I'm sorry. I mean, he never said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I caused my family all of this pain.
Now, let's talk about the bigger picture, because this wasn't just Tina. The Times reported that insiders close to King Charles said Harry has a habit of seeing conspiracies anytime things don't go his way. And frankly, that tracks. Every setback becomes a personal attack. Every closed door is somehow part of a grand plot. But here's the thing, not everything is a conspiracy. Sometimes it's just consequences. Plain and simple. This security case was always going to go this way. The Home Office, the police, the judiciary, they are not going to override national policy to cater to someone who voluntarily stepped down. It's not a personal vendetta. It's reality. If you quit your job, you don't get to keep the office benefits. That's not a punishment. It's just how life works. And the fact that Harry still doesn't seem to get that it's genuinely baffling to many and literally shows how far removed he is from reality. But perhaps the clearest sign that the tide has truly turned came when even Harry and Meghan's most loyal media, Chris Shipp, began backing away. Chris has long been seen as their soft landing in British media, and Aisha Hazarika, who literally sat beside Harry at a Travelist event and was publicly embraced by the Sussex camp, are finally beginning to express doubt. These are media personalities who have spent years defending Harry and Meghan, often twisting themselves into knots to justify the unjustifiable. Their reporting has, at times, felt more like PR than journalism, and yet even they couldn't ignore the tone-deaf absurdity of Harry's latest comments, particularly his public remarks about King Charles's cancer diagnosis. For those who followed this saga from the start, this is a turning point. When even the client journalists start expressing discomfort, it's not just a PR crisis, it's a collapse of the entire Sussex narrative in the UK. Because once the media voices who've stood by you start peeling away, there's no one left to carry your message, and even when they do speak, it's gone from loyal support to barely hiding their frustration. At this point, Harry and Meghan aren't just running out of allies, they're running out of excuses. And the silence where there should have been accountability is louder than any interview they'll ever give.
Entering into talking about his father's cancer, and as you just heard there, saying, I don't know how long my father's got to live. I think that really did shock Buckingham Palace last night when they heard it, and that's why the sort of response from those inside, the sort of unnamed sources, has been so, so strong today.
And what have your palace sources been telling you about this?
Well, look, when Harry says he's not sure whether the family can trust him anymore because of all the private and personal details he shared in his memoir Spare, well, he's not wrong to make that conclusion. I mean, palace sources say, look, Harry's proved once again with this interview that he can't be trusted with any private information whatsoever. And again, this is one of the reasons why they don't talk or why reconciliation is so hard, because no one in the palace, and let's be clear, we're talking about King Charles, his father, or his brother Prince William, is sure that whatever the discussions they have or meetings they might talk about or arguments they might have, like all families do, of course, that it won't end up in Spare #2 or in Netflix series #6. So they are very cautious, very guarded when it comes to talking about Harry, and that's why when Harry's been to London recently, at the same time as his father, you know, one's been in St Paul's and one at Buckingham Palace, which, as you know, Aisha, are not a million miles apart, and they still haven't managed to meet.
And can we talk about Prince Harry's decision to publicly state that he doesn't know how long his father has to live on international television? It was met with genuine shock inside Buckingham Palace. That wasn't an overreaction, but frankly, a moment that crossed an invisible line of decency. To weaponize your father's cancer diagnosis in the middle of a public relations drama is not just poor judgment, it's tasteless. And many have expressed the obvious fact that grief, illness, death, these are sacred, intimate moments for most families. But somehow, Harry has managed to turn even that into a talking point. It's out of such remarks that even those who once defended him are starting to wince.
Veering into talking about his father's cancer, and as you just heard there, saying, I don't know how long my father's got to live. I think that really did shock Buckingham Palace last night when they heard it, and that's why the sort of response from those inside, the sort of unnamed sources, has been so, so strong today.
Chris Shipp, even after being rather charitable when reporting on the Sussexes, didn't offer a single word of defense this time. That's telling. This is the same man who often downplayed the more controversial decisions coming out of Montecito, and yet here he was, nodding along to the palace sources who now openly say he simply can't be trusted, not with private conversations, not with personal information, not even with the dignity of silence. And this is why reconciliation is, at this point, a fantasy. King Charles and Prince William are not playing emotional roulette. Every private word shared with Harry is at risk of being repackaged for a documentary, a memoir, or worse, twisted into a PR weapon in a legal filing. It's no wonder the palace keeps its distance. How can they meet in good faith when they know tomorrow's headlines might come directly from tonight's heart-to-heart?
And what have your palace sources been telling you about this?
Well, look, when Harry says he's not sure whether the family can trust him anymore because of all the private and personal details he shared in his memoir Spare, well, he's not wrong to make that conclusion. I mean, palace sources say, look, Harry's proved once again with this interview that he can't be trusted with any private information whatsoever. And again, this is one of the reasons why they don't talk or why reconciliation is so hard, because no one in the palace, and let's be clear, we're talking about King Charles, his father, or his brother Prince William, is sure that whatever the discussions they have or meetings they might talk about or arguments they might have, like all families do, of course, that it won't end up in Spare #2 or in Netflix series #6. So they are very cautious, very guarded when it comes to talking about Harry, and that's why when Harry's been to London recently, at the same time as his father, you know, one's been in St Paul's and one at Buckingham Palace, which, as you know, Aisha, are not a million miles apart, and they still haven't managed to meet.
The body language of the pro-Harry press is quite telling. Aisha Hazarika, in an almost apologetic tone, also admitted that maybe it's time to stop. That level of restrained frustration from a former cheerleader is revealing. She's still trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but even she's reaching her limit. You could hear it in her voice, like a friend trying to excuse someone's behavior at a dinner party while quietly dying of secondhand embarrassment.
I'm quite a sympathetic crowd, but even I'm a bit like, is it time just to maybe sort of stop talking about it now? Because it has been out there a lot now.
In fact, both Aisha and Chris both acknowledged that Harry does do good work. Invictus Games, the Well Child Awards, his travel foundation. That's not in dispute. But what is in dispute is his inability to read the room, or the world, or the palace. The man simply won't stop talking.
Harry does good work. I keep referencing things like Invictus Games, things like the Well Child Awards, which he still comes over for every single year. But, where I think you say, it just sometimes just feels like he just doesn't know when to stop.
Would you believe that even after losing his security case in court, he immediately turned around and sent letters to the Home Secretary, still fighting, still convinced there's a grand conspiracy against him? He even blamed the last conservative administration, as if his security detail is a matter of party politics rather than actual threat assessment. It's becoming clear that for all the polished messaging and calculated interviews, Harry is increasingly stray further and further from reality. People are exhausted. I mean, his story doesn't evolve. H grievances never end. And quite frankly, it's become boring. Worse than boring. It's repetitive, self-indulgent, and out of touch. And here's the thing. This isn't just about one or two careless interviews. This is about a pattern of behavior that makes people uncomfortable. We all know someone who constantly vents family drama on social media, airing dirty laundry for likes and sympathy, which is so awkward. And Harry, whether he realizes it or not, is becoming that person on a global scale. Even the polls back it up. Sympathy for Harry is down. People are starting to see through the contradictions, the paranoia, the same old narratives. And to think that Meghan hasn't commented, not even a quiet tweet of solidarity, speaks volumes. Many feel he's thrown Harry under the bus on this, yet she's been a key player in all this. We are witnessing the beginning of an exodus. People are quietly stepping off the crazy train. And for Harry and Meghan, that ought to be the loudest wake-up call of all.
And a question that I've pondered particularly recently, Chris, is who is advising Harry and Meghan? Because it does seem that some of their recent sort of decisions have been quite sort of questionable. I mean, have they got good advisors? Are they doing things by themselves?
Look, I think at the end of the day, you can get all the advice you want, and this, by the way, goes for principals in the royal family as well. You can have all the advice you want, but at the end of the day, you make the decision you want to make. So even if his advisors are saying don't do this or don't do that, or perhaps when you did this interview yesterday, don't veer off course and talk about your father's cancer, it's Harry's decision whether or not to talk about it, and he clearly decided that he would.
At this point, it's quite literally Harry and Meghan against the world, and not in the noble, brave way they imagine it. Because let's be honest, no serious strategist, no seasoned PR expert, and certainly no sane royal watcher would ever recommend the approach they keep taking, not unless their goal was to torch every remaining bridge with the British public and the royal family. There's a very clear pattern here. They're given sound, reasoned advice, and then immediately do the opposite, time and time again. It's almost as if the advice they receive is viewed not as guidance, but as a challenge. Don't do this interview, it's a bad look, becomes, oh perfect, let's double down and make it worse. And what do we get in return? Emotional manipulation dressed up as vulnerability, and an endless stream of self-pity that's beginning to lose even the most sympathetic of ears. But the outrage isn't just back home in the UK. Even American media outlets that were once their strongest allies are now raising their eyebrows in disbelief, because when you intentionally ignore good counsel and then act shocked when the backlash comes, it's no longer naivety, but arrogance. At the heart of Harry's most recent PR blunder lies one tactic in particular: emotional blackmail. Let's call it what it is. Dangling the grandchildren as bait, suggesting King Charles won't get access to Archie and Lilibet unless certain demands are met, is both repulsive and manipulative.
Look at the risks, look at the threat, look at the impact that if anything was to happen to me, my wife, or my father's grandchildren, if anything was to happen to them, look where the responsibility lies.
As one commentator has rightly noted, this kind of emotional leverage only works when the person on the receiving end doesn't have other grandchildren to dote on. But King Charles does. He has thriving, loving relationships with George, Charlotte, and Louis, grandchildren he sees regularly, who are present, who aren't part of some transactional emotional campaign waged across the Atlantic. Which begs the question, what do Harry and Meghan think this achieves? Because from the outside, it doesn't scream loving parents. It screams bitterness and entitlement. It makes them look cold and calculating, as if their children are pawns in a long, drawn-out grievance war. And perhaps most tragically, they seem unable or unwilling to consider the consequences of this strategy in the long term. What happens when it's too late, like when King Charles is no longer around? If they will be at peace with themselves, knowing his children never truly knew their grandfather, then we're dealing with psychos. Because it's not just that Harry is estranged from his family, it's that he refuses to do the one thing that might actually move things forward: have a private, honest conversation away from cameras and headlines. But no, For Harry, fueled by Meghan of course, the only acceptable apology is a public spectacle, a bow before the court of public opinion. And as long as that's the demand, nothing will change. And this comment explained it perfectly. Harry whines about his father not talking to him, but his own wife hasn't spoken to her own father or family in 7 years. Does he not see his own hypocrisy? And then, as if he couldn't make matters worse, he jet sets off to Las Vegas, on Archie's birthday no less. The very same man who once made a whole media spectacle about urgently flying back home for Archie's birthday during King Charles's coronation is now apparently too busy for it altogether. This hypocrisy sticks to high heavens. What's worse, you'd think someone as PR conscious as Harry would remember how that Vegas trip last time worked out for him. Well, here we are again, and while we're not expecting naked billiards this time around, the optics are still concerning. It's Archie's birthday, and his father is making headlines for being in a casino city. The tone deafness is extraordinary. As for Meghan, if we know anything about her tight grip on the Sussex image machine, one has to assume Harry's trip was either reluctantly agreed upon by both of them or quietly resented. Either way, it's a mess of their own making. And yet somehow, we know the blame will still be shifted outward. It always is. Let's be clear, this is no longer about whether Harry and Meghan are misunderstood. It's about whether they're interested in being understood, or simply want to be pitied, unchallenged, and unaccountable. Because if they were truly seeking reconciliation, they'd stop turning every disagreement into a Netflix plotline and start acting like adults. But no, instead, it's Vegas, vendettas, and a vindictive PR campaign that now feels not just misguided, but cruel. Public opinion has reached a boiling point. People are fed up with Harry's self-pity parade, and the backlash is louder than ever. This person said, whoever has been advising Harry should be fired or divorced. This person said, I thought they hated the system of the monarchy and ran away from it. Why would they expect their protection if they chose to have nothing to do with them? Someone else said, he did the interview to purposefully stab his father in the back. He did the same with his grandparents. How despicable can one be? I told y'all the people have already caught on, and everyone and their dog knows that King Charles can't talk to him, as anything said to him or do will be in the media and next book. Thanks for sticking around, truly. Your thoughts mean everything, so don't hold back in the comments and let us know where you stand on all this. Has Harry finally crossed the line for good, or is there still room for redemption? Either way, keep it locked right here, because we've got more tea, more drama, and more royal mess coming your way very soon.